and welcome to Rauta's infamous worst to best videos. Now sometimes people make funny remarks how these lists should be from good to best. I mean, there is no such thing as bad album by this band you're talking about. Sometimes it's really accurate. I mean, I've gone through bands like Bull Thrower, no bad album, no, not even a mediocre one. I've been going through bands like Ergohol, same applies here. I've been gone to Death, all great albums, more or less. But then again, some of these feature also bands like Battery. Curious enough, they have a couple of bad albums. Or Dark Throne, which also has some albums which, in my opinion, not necessarily bad, but maybe not worth owning. So this time I'm touching this somewhat hot potato called Emperor. Yes, the very classic Norwegian band from the early 90s. Now this is a curious band in so many ways. And why it's a hot potato, let me explain. I'll try to anyway. I know this video might get a little bit of people upset there. And it's totally fine. By the way, I am not looking for a circle jerk company here. I'm trying to get some conversation going on, some discussion. We don't have to agree on things. I'm gonna say something that might put some people upset, and it's totally fine, by the way. If that means you're gonna unsubscribe me, fine, more than fine. But I hope that you also consider some of my words, because I'm gonna challenge some of the opinions here with my video, and that's the bottom line here. Now, Emperor is an interesting band for so many reasons. First of all, it's one of the cornerstones of Norwegian black metal bands. That is, we're talking about the second wave of black metal. Those who have no idea what the second wave is, I'm not gonna get into depth, but everybody knows that the first wave of black metal happened in the 80s instead of 90s. And what it means to be one of the cornerstones of Norwegian black metal, then again, means like, the bands that kind of early 90s started doing black metal. That is when those first wave bands were kind of goners, and, Norwegian decided to take the crown with such bands, but not, just limited to bands like Dark Throne, Mayhem, Emperor, Immortal, and so forth. Now, there was a lot of bands which started around early 90s, and some of them were gone only a few years later. Now, it's funny, and this is something that was reminded to me by a colleague of mine, a writer colleague who writes in a metal magazine. He pointed out that there are lots of bands which are considered quite new because they have been out there for like 5 years or 10 years, maybe before even, doing their first album. And the funny thing is, Emperor lasted only for 10 years before it, just decided to call it quits. And then those artists started to pursue other careers, so to say. Ishan mainly decided to go on solo career, and there were lots of other bands like Zyklon from Samov and etc. Now the thing here is, Emperor's career might have lasted only 10 years, but they were very, very active, and they far burned hot. By hot, I mean they were very, very active. They were, progressing and changing their style so quickly that hardly most of the other bands didn't have any kind of idea how can you change so much over such a short time span. That is, over 10 years, give or take, things happened in a fast wave. I'm gonna just use this Metal Archive site as a backdrop here, so you can pretty much figure out what I'm talking about. But a quick look on the description box before I start to go from the worst to best, and you get the idea what's going on. Now, even though the band started in 1991, it was as late as 1994 before the first album came out. I mean, it's not that many years, given that back in the days especially, bands, first made a kind of a rehearsal tapes and demos, and only after maybe EP split or whatever, like it's the case with Emperor, demo, EP, split, and then you do full-length albums. Now, so many bands either skip all the demo phases and just, after a couple of years, maybe after 0 years, maybe during their founding years, they're already doing the debut album, and as such, skipping the important lessons, like what so many bands did in the 80s and 90s. But I mean, if the first album was 1994, by 2001, when the last album came out, the band was kind of a goner. I mean, obviously, Metal Archives lists the other active years here from 2005 to 2007, and later on. But it doesn't really matter because when you take a look at the list, it's all about compilations, live albums, boxed sets. So basically nothing really happened in 2001 in terms of new music. Now there's another topic which is making Emperor very, very interesting. Not only all these things happened in less than 10 years, talking about albums here, it's also worth mentioning that, you know, the band changed quite a lot. And obviously it depends from a fan to another fan, you know, how much you will like any given album. I mean, it probably depends on which phase you enter the Emperor phase. I mean, it's very, very much a band that changed maybe too much for some people. And that's why I think my video about Emperor is kind of a controversial. Some people will call me, you know, with just names because they don't like what I'm about to say here. And it's fine, like I said. But it's worth mentioning that, you know, Emperor is one of those bands that changed way more than most of the bands. I mean, take a look at the Gorgoroth, for example, or even bands like Mayhem, you know. While there were changes, they were not that big. Not in terms of, you know, how the genres go. I mean, one could say, simplify, it's symphonic black metal. Yeah, kind of a true. But then again, if you take a look at the first album and the last one, well, they are quite far from each other. It's a lot of change going on with the band and, you know, all that stuff. But enough of this kind of an introduction chat. I'm here to tell you why I don't think Emperor is that good of a band and why I think it's a good thing that they actually quit after only a few years of existence. Now, which one would be my favorite and which one would be my least favorite? That's always the question. And I'll be honest about it. When I heard this album originally for the first time about 20 years ago, I wasn't as disappointed in that as I was, well, now. Because the thing here is, I was very, very disappointed in IX, that is Ninth Equilibrium, when it came in 1999. Because it was so different from Anthems. And I was like, man, this is a horrible album. I remember thinking like, this is like 3 out of 10. Yes, that horrible. But now when times have passed and years have passed, I have to say, I have changed my mind a little bit. Ninth Equilibrium ain't the worst one of Emperor. That one goes to Prometheus, like so many other people say. Prometheus, the discipline of fire and demise. Not that this is so different in style from, you know, Ninth Equilibrium or IXE, like some people call it, me included usually, because the style is somewhat similar. These both are very chaotic in nature. They are symphonic at the same time, yes, given there's a lot of synth patterns here, a lot of kind of crazy and very creative guitar work, and also those kind of a classic trademark Ishan raspy vocals. Not the best in line, not the worst one. I mean, they're quite a trademark thing, but really, they're not the rawest kind. They are not the most extreme kind. Actually, they're the kind of a middle road one. You know, the kind that is safe to approach. Very kind of easy to like in terms of black metal vocals. But are they really that good? Oh, well, not so much if you ask me. Now the thing here is, they're totally doable. And they are not the problem of the album. What comes to the album's problematic parts, in my opinion, is that it is something like a megalomania thing. I mean, everything here is what some people like reminded me like, yeah, it's pretty much what Ishan was going for his solo career. And this was happening under the moniker of Emperor instead of Ishan. And I think by this time the band should have called it quits, or, you know, Ishan should have started his solo career not to miss Emperor so much. But then again, who I am to say? Who I am to judge like, hey, you cannot use that name. Obviously, they were riding the wave, and they were riding a big wave. By this time when this album came out, black metal, especially the Norwegian kind, was relatively big. And obviously you don't just, you know, sell your #1 product that easily. I mean, if you have a brand and using that brand to sell, whether you were talking about albums or gigs, mind you, this was years and years before kind of a YouTube and Spotify and things like that became big thing. People were actually buying CDs and vinyls and all that stuff, probably more CDs anyway. But I mean, if you take a look at this list, already this list from, the original CDs and vinyls and tapes, then more CDs, more vinyls, more... You get the idea. Lots of reissues over the year. And why so? Well, obviously people wanted more and more and more. Supply and demand, my friends. But in my opinion, this is quite, now I wouldn't say horrible album, but quite a mediocre piece of black metal. Now, this is a very mixed bag of good. Some people will like it because it's so creative, so progressive and all that stuff. But me, I don't know, this is kind of a mess. First of all, the production is somewhat weak, especially for the multi-layered music here. You have really crazy, like we hear shit kind of a synth part. Some of them don't, in my opinion, make sense at all. And the guitar is way too much on the background. It's not really guitar-dominated metal. One could even say this is more about synths than it's about vocals and guitars and drums. Even the drums are less creative, or at least taking less attention here than synths. And in my opinion, this is where the band really went south. I mean, they were already doing it with 9 Equilibrium, but this is a lot worse. Not a lot, but worse anyway. And to be honest, I don't find a single good song here. Some of them are like, okay, and some are like, why are you doing that? Now, I get it. People are gonna hate me what I'm saying here, but it's worth it, because in my opinion, this is an overrated album in so many ways. But then again, some people would be saying the same about my favorite albums, so it's only fair and square. But in my opinion, I really can't recommend Prometheus to anybody except those New Emperor fans who just want to listen to it all. But would I even ever recommend this to, hey, so you're interested in black metal, go check it out? Don't do it, unless you're fanatic about this kind of black metal. It's not a bad album, but I really can't say it's more than mediocre. Sorry. Now, pretty much the same words could be said about IX Equilibrium, which would be, well, the second worst in my list. Once again, this is a kind of an album that was already heading to this direction what Prometheus kind of did a little bit more. But in my opinion here, there are a little bit better riffs here and there. Synth parts are not that weird and all that stuff, but already this was going too much in places. Now there's, some parts which are really little bit better, like there's this one battery kind of song. It doesn't really fit the whole thing here, but it's good, so I don't complain. But I mean, other than that, in my opinion, there are no good songs really. This is a little bit better than mediocre for those few better ideas compared to Prometheus, but still I wouldn't rate this no better than maybe 6 out of 10. I mean, once again, the production is very, very messy, and there are lots of stuff here going all over. Lots of synths, lots of vocals, clean vocals, raspy vocals, lots of fast-paced drumming and all that stuff. And to me, it seems like since the debut album, the band had way too much, time to go that fast-paced stuff. And in my opinion, well, Emperor could have been better if they only had more dynamics in that sense. I mean, why the hurry, especially when you have so much stuff going on? It seems like even the guitars and synthesizer are like competing, like who gets to play most? And in my opinion, it doesn't make sense. And I don't know, this could have been a lot better if the production was better, if the vocals were better. Now it feels like it was like forced to have so many clean vocal parts. I mean, Ishan isn't a bad vocalist, but let's be honest about it. This was all over like going black metal, becoming a kind of a power metal thing or rock opera. Just too much stuff force-fed into the whole deal here. And on top of that, this cover, my friends, why? It is like the pre-Photoshop era, but instead you had to have also those faces on this cover. Why? Why on earth you would like... Okay, I'm not gonna rant about it, but I'll say this one. This isn't stuff that I want to ever come back to. I already had like 20 years before listening to this again, and still kind of disappointed, even though it wasn't as bad as I remembered it to be. But once again, not my kind of album. Not that I look for these kind of things in black metal. I am different kind of audience. Give it or take it or as you want. I don't care. Now, Anthems would be the second best album by Emperor. And in my opinion, it isn't that good of an album. Now, I bought it in 1997 when it came out. And I had huge expectations because In the Nightside Eclipse, which is an album I truly, truly love. It's a fantastic, fundamental black metal album from Norway. But I was disappointed with Anthems. At first I kind of liked it and I tried to like it even more. But as the times passed, I kind of figured out this isn't that good. Now after maybe 15-20 years that I was listening to this prior making to this video, and I was like, okay, this has some nice ideas, but it also very close to mediocre ones. And people were like upset when I was, talking about it on Facebook. I was saying like, this is sometimes like 6 out of 10, sometimes like 7 out of 10. People were like, you really can't call it 6 out of 10. It's like 5 out of 5, which means 10 out of 10. And people were like, crazy Jerry, you don't understand things about black metal, blah, 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 that kind of stuff. As if people suddenly stopped having this dialogue about, a band or music because they just disagreed so much. Like I said, it's totally fine. But the thing here, which I don't understand why people worship this, is because I'll put it this way. This album is half good and half mediocre plus. Let's put it this way. The early tracks here, for example, the intro is pretty cool, even though it's way too lengthy, but I mean, it's kind of cool. It's kind of more than just an intro. And then becomes the first real track, Ye Entrance Imperium, which is actually very, very good. It's violent and it's kind of crazy, and if only Emperor had stayed on that path with this album, I would have enjoyed this quite a bit. Suspected Night Spirit is pretty good as well, maybe the second best track on the album, and then it starts to decline. By Encircled by Chaos is like, in my opinion, like the demo version kind of a track compared in the Nights of the Eclipse. You clearly have those same elements, but it's not as good as the songs on that. The Laws and Curse of Reverence, pretty much the same thing. I mean, it's almost like Golden Era Emperor, but it's not. But the thing here is, 2 first tracks, excluding the intro, they're the good ones. Then 2 tracks which are pretty good, and the rest of the tracks are like, Acclamation of Bonds, with Strength I Burn, The Wanderer. I mean, they are not that good. Some people, it seems like, are having the same thing as with Nemesis Divina by Satyricon. It's easy, especially if you play this on LP. You get all the best tracks on A-side, and you could be really, yay, one of the best black metal albums ever. Unless you go to the B-side, which is something like, hey, this is an Emperor copycat band, which is a word I could use for Prometheus and Equilibrium. And I find this kind of a hard an album to like because of all these things. Now, Trim's drumming is great. He's very, very intense and all that stuff. But then again, compared to the best death metal drummers, thrash metal drummers, or even drummers in black metal, like from Abzu, Proscriptor, it's not that great. I mean, it's intense and all that speed, and it's kind of a crazy, but only in black metal territory, only in black metal genre. It's very, very like, wow. But that doesn't save the fact that there are lots of somewhat mediocre riffs. Synth parts are a lot better than on Equilibrium or Prometheus, but even sometimes I feel like it's even too much, even like useless. I mean, like too much that progressive experimental stuff, which isn't that great. And then you have those clean vocals. In my opinion, too much of that. Now, Anthems ain't bad album at all. Like, if they got big picture. I mean, like I said, it has a few good tracks, few mediocre plus tracks, and some of those tracks in between, which I would call decent. And in my books, it makes this a decent album. But do I want to buy it again? No. Like I said, this is once again a kind of a disappointment, which I already felt in 1997. I know some people are going to be upset about it and say like, hey, I don't understand anything about black metal because I cannot really praise this album to be that 5 out of 5 ones. But like I said, I'm not looking for a circle jerk. I'm just saying this is not the stuff I'm looking for black metal. Most of the so-called symphonic black metal albums are not, in my opinion, that good. And that applies to Anthems as well. So if I would be reviewing this album today, not accounting anything like nostalgia with blah 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 to go with, I would say this is 7 out of 10. Quite decent, but nothing better than that. Which leads me, consequently, to the best album by Emperor. That is my firm belief that this is the best album the band has ever done, and also one of the best, if not the best, symphonic black metal albums of all time, because here everything is in great balance. You know, whether we are talking about the synth parts or the kind of screamy vocals or guitar work, everything is just, you know, in a perfect place. There's nothing, absolutely nothing that is wrong with this album. I've actually made this as a classic review, so I'm not gonna into that much of detail here. I'm just saying that this is something that Emperor should have been making as their third or fourth album. So instead of, you know, climbing up, you know, like first step, okay album, second one, a little bit better, third album, quite good, and fourth, yes. This is the way that ladder should be worked. But in my opinion, Emperor was like on decline. And it's kind of a weird because, I mean, after all, they started with this demo EP and split. They did like this good split with Emperor, you know, with the material done before the debut album. And that already showed the potential. And in so many ways, that material is better than, you know, whatever they did after in the Nightside Eclipse. So it's kind of a weird. Now, all this happened within 10 years. It's kind of a weird that the band went so much in decline. Maybe the band became sophisticated way too quickly. After all, that was what was said about Anthems, you know, became this kind of a sophisticated black metal art. Something along those lines. And I guess that is one of the problems, you know, versus having these guys with letters and chains and spikes and corpse paint, suddenly it becomes this universal black metal. You know, you comb your hair back, you start wearing, I don't know, ties and, you know, kind of office t-shirt look. You start, you know, putting up clothes, you're wearing clothes as if you're going to a class at university, or maybe to work at your Microsoft desk job. And that's where it kind of gets weird. But I mean, to each his own. I'm not gonna say that they did wrong choices. Obviously, Emperor is very, very successful. And now, mind you, I'm gonna end this in positive things. So Emperor became quite successful. They have played good shows with both old and new material. And they became very talented musicians. So nothing wrong in that. And I met Ishan a couple of years ago for Rauta interviews. There's actually two, Emperor one and Ishan one. And he was a really, really nice gentleman. And I think he's a smart person as well. But what I'm saying here, in hindsight, he was steering the Emperor boat, in my opinion, to the wrong direction. Now the curious thing is, even though I'm not Ishan's solo project fan, I'm not fan of the style he's doing, but I respect what he accomplished both with his solo career and Emperor. So even though I don't like that much these albums after In the Nightside Eclipse, I think it's still one of the cornerstones of Norwegian black metal. At least Emperor was doing something different. Mind you that I am not into the style given, but at least it isn't, you know, the typical stuff. So here it is, my take on Emperor. What is your favorite worst to best order? Let me know, and feel free to vote up or down. It doesn't matter. Just vote and let me know what you think about Emperor. That's all, folks. Take care. And oh yeah, one more thing. What should be the next band for worst to best? Now here are the conditions. Preferably a band that is now defunct, that is not active anymore, and if it is active, it must be 30 years or older. And at least 3 albums. Makes no sense to do worst to best with less than 3. Even 3 is a little bit of a why. And preferably on Spotify, which is something that I use on the go. At home, I listen to review albums, so that's that. But feel free to suggest me a band that would fit these terms, and let's do another worst to best. Meanwhile, take care and enjoy. Bye bye.